bonus episode. I hope I didn't blow your ears off with that one. Anyway, this is a really cool bonus episode, and it has almost next to nothing to do with agriculture. Anyway, when I first thought about doing this podcast, I had to practice the interview skills, practice the setup, all the gadgets that I have, like Skype and the microphone and all that jazz. So I did what any normal person would do. I called my best friend, Ben Hall. I was like, hey, Ben, can I interview you? He was like, yeah, sure. So do it. So I interviewed him and turned out really well. So I've known Ben for about 28 years. Our dads were best friends. We're best friends along with our friend Matthew. Ben is somebody that I've grown up with. No matter how far away we were, we went to different middle schools, different high schools, different colleges, but we've always been best of friends, which has been really, really, really awesome. Ben is the only person that I know that is living his childhood dream right now. He is a director in Hollywood. He's filmed 2 films now. One we're going to talk about that comes out very soon. He's worked on countless films, big budget films, big TV shows. He has worked with Jake Gyllenhaal, Amy Adams, Zach Galifianakis, Andrew Garfield, Tom Ford, the director and fashion designer. He's worked with a ton of people. Not to even overstate that he's met Steven Spielberg, Jon Favreau, a bunch of really cool people. He has got an awesome career that he's doing. He's working in Hollywood, trying to make a name for himself, and he's pretty much succeeding, which is really, really cool. We're going to talk during the interview about why he got started filmmaking, how he got started, what he wants to do, things he's worked on. And we're also going to talk about kind of his movie, Night and Today, which we'll link in the description of this episode and everything, kind of how it relates to Hurricane Michael and how we had that happen a few months ago. Again, this was recorded months ago when we were just trying to figure out how to do a podcast. Ben's a great storyteller. Really hope you enjoy it. Check out his movie, Night and Today. We'll have the trailer and everything linked below. And if you're on Amazon, his first movie, The Man from Outer Space, is actually on Amazon right now if you want to go check it out. Anyway, this is the bonus episode with my best friend, Ben Hall. Hope you enjoy it. Thanks, Ben, for being on. Best of luck. Thanks.
All right, well, welcome to the Farm Traveler Podcast. My name is Trevor, and we're going to have a very different episode today. We've got my best friend, Ben Hall. Say hi, Ben Hall.
Hey, my name is Hall, Ben Hall.
So, Ben, I guess you could say you have the unfortunate experience of being a best friend with me for how long?
Too long, to be quite honest. 25, how old are we? 27 years is, that's quite a grueling time period.
I mean, we're pretty old. Our dads were friends. We're friends. Our friend Matthew is friends, although I don't even know if he listened to podcasts. I mean, he's got an IQ of 400, so I'm sure he has listened to them.
Some see this generational friendship as a blessing. I I think Trevor can agree, see it as a curse. So it's insane. I mean, we can't get away from each other. I live on the other side of the country, and we can't get away from each other.
Yeah. So Ben grew up in Marietta, Florida. I grew up in Blountstown, Florida. Our dads were friends. We were friends. So, all right, Ben, let's talk about movies. I know that's kind of not what our podcast is about, but you grew up liking movies. We're going to get to you being in Hollywood, you making movies in a little bit. But right now, tell me where that all started from, where your passion for movies started. Was it Star Wars? Was it Indiana Jones? What kind of started that fire?
So I don't even know if you know this, Trev, but when I was 3 and 4 years old, I would watch a movie and then I would completely reenact it for my parents. I'd make them sit down and for a good hour or so basically hit all the highlights of a movie. I would use my action figures as the wide shots, and then no joke, I would play the close-ups. So I understood the differences between shots and how things are cut and why they're cut for, a dramatic purpose. And so I was doing that at 3 and 4 years old. And I was always just really future driven growing up. And so when I was 6 and 7, I thought I wanted to be an architect. I loved houses. I loved architecture. But it became very clear to me that I wasn't very good at math and I didn't draw very well either. It wasn't for me. And then, just you mentioned Star Wars, Indiana Jones. I mean, classic films that, all of us grew up on, and I was no exception. And, I think in the back of my mind, I just could see things so visually, so clearly all the time. I thought in movie language. And just one day it dawned on me when I was watching the special features for probably the worst of the Lucas Star Wars films, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I was watching the behind the scenes on that, and it just clicked. I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do when I grow up. I want to direct movies. From that point on, that's all I've done.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sorry if this embarrasses you a little bit, but your room growing up, I still know, and it's still probably untouched. Star Wars memorabilia everywhere, a picture of George Lucas, Steven Spielberg stuff everywhere. And you had one of those bedrooms where when you walk into it, you're like, I think this dude likes movies.
Yeah, I was definitely that kid. Yeah, I definitely had a lot of Star Wars posters. My cousin, I think when I was like in middle school, she sent a letter to Lucasfilm and just asking if George Lucas would sign a letter to me. And of course he couldn't. I'm sure he gets thousands of those kind of requests. But they did, out of the kindness of their own heart, send me a photo of George Lucas and the Sony camera they shot Star Wars Episode 2 with, actually. And what's kind of cool about that is that picture, I'm sure it's not rare by any means, but that was right at the cusp of the digital revolution when it comes to motion pictures. So that was a pretty cool moment to have captured by that.
So let's see. So we made a handful of movies growing up. I guess the first was Asteroid, then Secret Agent Man, and then, Secret Agent Man 1, 2, and 3, and then The Campers and Vision. Which movie do you want to talk most about? Which do you think of all those movies that we made throughout our childhood was like the most impactful for you? I'm going to go ahead and assume Vision.
Yeah, I mean, like, overall impactful, yeah, Vision, absolutely. But you actually missed one. We made a movie called Love Song. Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. Vision at the end of the day was the most important movie I made during that time, just because I finally, for the most part, obviously with help from you and Mr. Alan Barber and the people who were involved, I finally kind of found my footing on what it meant to make a movie and how to do it fairly well. I mean, I actually rewatched it recently, and it doesn't hold up. I'd like it to, but still, like, I looking back, knowing what I know now, and looking back 10 years ago, yeah, that movie, like, I saw the patterns of who I wanted to become in that, and that was pretty cool. But if I had to pick one of those movies that I love the most, it's actually Love Song, because I just feel like that movie captured me in that moment more than any other movies did. Like, it just captured kind of my personality, my style, and my humor. And I just don't feel like any of the other movies quite captured it. They captured bits of me, but that one really, I could sit down and watch that one over and over again. And that one definitely doesn't hold up, but I still can sit down and watch that a lot.
So tell us the plot of that one. Kind of give us a recap of what exactly went down in the good old-fashioned Love Song movie.
Sure. So Love Song is about this mild-mannered office worker who's trying to ask this lovely new girl out on a date, and he's got two kind of villainous co-workers who are always kind of taking things from him. And in fact, you played one of those guys, if you remember. You and Paul Hoff were those two characters. And so anyways, Paul Hoff's character basically gets to the girl before he does and asks her on a date, and he just kind of feels all downtrodden. And so the whole time, the whole movie is kind of being narrated by music. Like you mentioned, we had some Beatles songs in there, just songs from the 1960s that just really captured each scene. I basically wrote these scenes to these cues of music that I really loved growing up. And of course, in the end of the movie, the mild-mannered guy does win. He does get the girl. The girl realizes that Paul Hoff's character is a jerk. And the movie ends happily. And it was a reflection. It was definitely a reflection of me really liking a girl in high school who I had no chance with, and we never dated. I was just friends with. But it just really captured that sense of me longing to have a relationship and how it could play out in a movie.
It is such a beautiful movie. And let's make a note of this. The mild-mannered man, Dallin Kelson, is that right? Dallin Kelson?
Dallin, yeah.
So I don't know if you know this. I mean, you probably do, but back when he was going to Chipola College, he single-handedly beat Harvard's Brain Bowl team. So the dude was a good actor, and he was a brilliant man. I mean, he still is a brilliant man.
I think I did hear about that. Yeah, very smart guy, very funny. He always, I mean, it's really comical because we not only did we make these movies, Trevor, and actually you were behind a lot of this portion of it, but we would shoot behind the scenes footage as well. And when you go back and look at that behind the scenes, I'm a terrible director. Like I would basically say, okay, stand over there and then say this. No, don't do it like that.
I want to go and see. I just want to see you on a film set now and see how you actually interact with actors. Because I remember back during Asteroid, which was like the first kid movie we made in middle school, was when this rock hit the world. And I remember your direction was stand there with your mouth open, act scared. Great. I remember that was it. I was like, okay.
I will say this. I will say this, and this still holds true today. Although I wasn't very good at communicating it, I did know what I wanted, and I would tell it to you.
You did a great job. All right, Ben. So let's fast forward. You went to North Carolina School of the Arts. You did 4 years there. Made what, 4 student films there?
Yeah, 4 that I'm proud of. I made one other one that I'm not very proud of. It just didn't turn out too hot. But yeah.
Wait, which one was that?
It was called Mr. Consumer. I don't even know if I showed it.
Okay, I don't think I ever saw that one. Yeah.
It was more of an exercise. We never showed it in like any of our theaters, because every year at the end of the year we'd show our films in the theaters, because we had 3 really great theater chambers there that would show 35 millimeter prints down to mini DV tape. But yeah, it was just this exercise, and I shot the movie. I mean, the movie is fine as it is. A 5-minute little piece about this guy. Actually, I don't really remember what it's about. It's about this guy who's just like really caught up in like social. Well, actually, it wasn't even social media, but just like computers and technology. And one day there's a blackout, and he doesn't know what to do. And the reason I don't like the movie that much is because it's just very cynical. It didn't have much heart to it. It was my first time trying to be really cynical with what I was saying, and I didn't like that about me. I didn't like that about the movie. I think everything I make, although I'm not necessarily looking to make sentimental movies, I am wanting them to always have a heart to them, and that one just didn't. So I rarely talk about it. And like I said, I don't even think I should.
It's the movie that shall not be mentioned.
That's right. But not to say, I mean, the people who worked on it were great. There's this guy named Nick Carner who was in it. I love him to death. He's a local actor in North Carolina. He was in a couple of the projects that my friends and I did during that time. But yeah, just like it was more of a flaw on me of not realizing what I wanted to do in a script, in that script.
Let's talk about when you first moved out to Culver City. You started working in Hollywood. You started working for shows, a few movies. Tell me about how the transition was to, all right, I have a degree in being a film director. Now I'm going to move out to the City of Angels, and I'm going to make movies. I got to get my foot in the door. How did you do it? What was that first step you took?
The first step was just getting here. And the second step was just God intervening, because, I've told you this a lot. The film industry is very unique. It doesn't matter. I could have 20 degrees on filmmaking and film theory. Wouldn't matter at all, to be quite honest. I'm very glad I went to film school. I would always do that again, because I learned the art and logistics of the craft, and plus just got a general college education. But when you step into the film industry, it truly is all about who you know and money. There are no other elements. And it just so happens that occasionally the people who know the right person happen to be talented and really make it. And so, yeah, I got out here, and I was excited. I was scared. I was nervous. And I basically was here 5 months without a legitimate full-time job, trying to figure it out, trying to break in. I'd already worked on a movie back in North Carolina with Owen Wilson and Zach Galifianakis, and got to really know the whole crew, and they were all out here. And so when I came out, I contacted all of them. I was like, hey, I'm here. Can you help me get a job? And, the thing is like they ultimately ended up helping me do that. But it's hard because they have to vouch for me, and they have to push me to a movie or a TV show that has an opening and needs someone, So, yeah, for 5 months, I just kind of picked up work where I could. I thankfully got a job with on the weekends for an outdoor cinema exposition here in LA called Street Food Cinema, and met a few people doing that. And then I was an intern over at Sony Pictures for Linda Opes Productions. She would be most known to our generation as one of the producers of Interstellar, which they were shooting at the time at Sony. So I actually got to see a little bit of that when they were shooting.
I remember you talking about that. I was so jealous.
Yeah, it was pretty darn cool. But so for 5 months, I was just really concerned I wasn't going to be able to get a job and make it out here. And then finally, one of my contacts from the film I did in North Carolina, they told me, hey, we got this friend who's looking for a PA. Do you want to do it? I'm like, yes, please. And it ended up being this show called You're the Worst for FX. And it was the pilot, and I didn't know anything more about it than the title. And sure enough, that show, I think, is in its final season this year. So it's been going for 5.5 years. But I only did the pilot. And then from that, and once again, it's all about who you know. So I finally got to work on another show, got to meet more people. This coordinator I was working for was really great. And she brought me on to another show. And then, once again, I just slowly but surely kept meeting more people and branching out. And it's been a roller coaster ride.
Dude, now I remember when I went out there to see you, you were job hunting and you were updating your resume. And I just remember seeing that resume, and at first glance, I was like, okay, he has experience, but not like his skill set. And I mean, I remember looking at it, it was like, oh, I worked on this show, I worked on that show. And just coming from, looking for a teaching job, I was talking about like, oh, I've got this certification, I've done this, I've done that. Let me tell you about this. And you told me that the industry out there, it's just about what you've done and who you know, and that's how you get the job. And that was just crazy to understand.
That's it. Yeah. No, I in fact, when I first came out here, all I had to my name was one PA job on this movie in North Carolina, and then the things I had directed at film school. And like, I'd also worked on other short films, and I had like the things I had directed, and someone, I can't remember who it was, but someone in the business saw that, and they're like, why do you have all this stuff you directed on there? I'm like, well, it's what I've done. They're like, no one cares. That makes sense. Why would they care? I'm not trying to get a job directing. I'm trying to get a job. I'm just trying to get my foot in the door, like you said. All it's about. I always joke that, like, I could be a chimpanzee, and as long as I knew the right person, I'd get the job over anybody else.
Yeah. Quick detour. I want you to give me a list. Give me 10 people, 10 famous people, directors, actors, musicians that you've seen while you've been in LA.
Okay, 10. All right. Well, obviously Steven Spielberg tops the list. Chris Columbus, who, for those who don't know, directed Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire. Scarlett Johansson, Brad Pitt, Sandra Bullock, Tom Ford, Amy Adams, Jake Gyllenhaal. I guess you could count Adam Sandler, because not only did I see him with you, Trev, that one time.
I remember that.
I also worked on the reshoots for Pixels, which was a movie he made a couple years ago. But I wasn't really around him. I was more around Chris Columbus, who directed that. So let's don't count him. So I still got 2. Man, who else?
Who did you see getting on the bus? Was that James Cameron?
So that's a funny story. I didn't see him. When I moved to LA, I actually first came out with my entire graduating class from film school. Our film school does this kind of tour of LA for a week, and then everyone else went home, but me and a couple of my buddies, we just stayed. We had an apartment. We'd already planned all this through. So we land in LA, and they take us to Santa Monica Pier, to the Promenade, is what it's called out there. And they said, all right, you guys just go hang out and meet us back here in an hour and a half. And we're like, okay, cool. Well, 30 minutes goes by. We're at the end of the pier, me and my good friend Darren Hummel, who you know. And we get a call from our teacher saying, guys, got to get back to the van right now. We're leaving right now. And we're like, what? Okay. So we like go running down the pier back up to the promenade area. And we see our van come in the corner, and like our teacher calls us, and he's like, look, I'm not stopping for you. Jump in the van. We're going to make this turn. And so we literally did that. Like, he stopped for a millisecond. Like, he didn't actually like drive us. Like, we didn't jump into a moving vehicle, but it was pretty close. And we get in, and everybody just has their mouth wide open looking out the window, and we're like catching our breath, and like, what's wrong? And they're like, did you just see who just passed? And we're like, no. And he's like, he was laughing at you guys. I'm like, who? He's like, James Cameron.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that was. I wish I would have seen him. That would have been great. Another person who I got to meet was Daniel Loopy. Most people wouldn't know who he is by name, but he's one of the mainline producers that Spielberg's been working with in the past couple of years. Okay. Ready Player One, Bridge of Spies. He's doing West Side Story with them. I'm trying to think of anyone else I've really come in contact with. Oh, Damon Wayans is pretty funny. That was pretty wild. I got to meet him on the Lethal Weapon pilot, and I'm very proud. I don't even remember what I said, but I'm very proud. I got to talk to him, and I said something funny and made him laugh, and that was like,
that's a pretty big accomplishment.
It really was. He did the Homie the Clown laugh, the thing, Yeah, it was pretty cool. So yeah, I guess that'd be 10. I definitely met more people, but I think those are always the ones that come to mind for me, for sure.
Okay, those are good top 10. I've got, and I'll get you to share these later, but you've got 2 stories that you have, and they're my absolute favorite. But so you've been in LA for how many years now? It seems like forever.
5.5 years. I'm closely. May will be 6 for me, and that's quite it's weird. It's very weird.
You're old. All right, so you've made 2 movies while you're out there, right? The Man from Outer Space and your next one, which is
called Night and Today. Yeah,
Night and Today. That's what it is.
I've made 2 feature films, and I've shot 2 spec commercials. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that I've directed. I've worked on countless others, but yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the The Man from Outer Space. Tell me about how that filming process was, and then what you learned at the end of it.
Sure. So I'd been in LA for a year and a half, being out here, being a production assistant. So, well, first of all, let me say this. This is a very important thing about what I've really learned overall about being in this business is that, once again, unlike most businesses where you start at the bottom and you have the chance, it's not always likely, but you definitely usually have the chance of working your way all the way to the top if you work hard, are good to the people you're around, and have a passion for what you do. Not so much in the film business. You don't. I don't know why they didn't correct this with me in film school. This is the one thing I would say film school did not clearly sit me down and tell me, but you cannot work your way up to being a film director. You either are or you're not. There is no work your way up to it. I mean, you can eventually maybe be an assistant director for 20 or 30 years, and maybe someone will give you a chance to be a director. Like I met this guy who's in his 60s. He's been ADing since he was my age and younger, and he just recently got to direct, or you might be a director of photography and do that for decades, and then maybe someone will give you the opportunity to direct. But there is no, it's just, there is no path to it. And I thought when I first got out here, I thought there was. I thought I could get on a show, work my way up, impress the people I need to impress, and, within 10, 15 years, be directing a major motion picture, or at least a studio picture of some sort. And I quickly realized that was just not the case. Like when you enter into a department, you are that department. They don't look at you any other way. So I had been talking to other people who had been doing a similar path to me. And they're much older than I was, and they told me, like, you know what, Ben, you got to go and make your own feature. Like if you want to really go after this, no one's going to give you the opportunity that you're looking for in the route you're going, or any route. He's like, you've got to impress otherwise. So I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And when I left college, I had decided I was going to make something within 2 years of moving out. So I was like, well, it's clearly more important now than ever. So so a year and a half in, I started trying to figure out what I could write on a small budget. And basically, I came to the conclusion that the best thing to do is to do 2 stories that I've already done before, but combine them. That was, ultimately the structure of Man from Outer Space is very similar to Vision. It's about this father who is ignoring his family because of work. So I just kind of took that and I was like, let me make this better. Let me massage this. Let me make this more, more depth to it, more meaning. And then I took kind of more this adventurous thriller aspect from a short film I did in college called The Man from Outer Space, which was about an astronaut who crash lands on Earth. And I was like, let me just take both of these and make a story within a story about this guy who's a screenwriter who's not paying attention to his family because he's trying to be successful. He's trying to make it in Hollywood. And he starts imagining himself in this story that he's writing, which is about this astronaut. So that was the conceit of it. And I was like, well, I know I can do this because I've essentially done this before. I'm just taking it to a different level and I'm combining it. So I wrote the script. And I slowly started trying to pitch it to people to try to get money. And of course, it took. Actually, in hindsight, I was able to pull the money together pretty fast, but it was painful in the moment because at first I thought I was going to need $100,000, and I was like, well, I can do it for 80, and then I was like, well, I can do it for 50, and then I was like, well, maybe I can do it for 40, and we ended up shooting the movie on $23,000, okay. Which is very low for a 75-minute feature film. So I just slowly pulled the money together. I kept working production during the day, and at night and on the weekends, I'd work on my project. And by the end of 2015, through family and friends, I was able to cobble together that $23,000, and I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And we shot it. We shot it in February 2016 over 14 days.
And you did it, man, and it was pretty darn good. It's still on Amazon, right?
It is. It's on Amazon. It looks like it might get to go to Redbox kiosks across the nation here in a couple months. I'm waiting to hear if that's so. But yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on Vudu. It's out there.
It's out there. All right. So looking back, what were some key things you learned from making that movie that you took into Night and Today? No pressure.
Yeah, the key things I think for me are I really realized. I mean, I've always been a very logistical person. I think one of the things I like to boast about, if you will, is is that I am both creative and logistical. Like not one aspect of how I think overweighs the other aspect. Like if I'm coming up with this crazy creative idea, I'm gonna have the logistics to back it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not gonna, like a lot of directors that I've worked for and met, they just make up crap and they have no idea how they're gonna do it. And then it turns out that a lot of people work very hard, too hard, to make something that hasn't been really thought through. So I really thought through The Man from Outer Space and all my planning, and it went pretty darn well. I mean, considering how short of a time period we had. But there was one scene. It was the biggest scene in the movie, 7 pages. We were on an exterior set. I had all my actors in the scene. It was such a big scene that I could not truly visualize it. Like everything else I'd ever made, I'd always was able to visualize it. But this scene was just so complex with how much dialogue there was, how much movement there was. Just a lot needed to happen. So I was like, well, I've got the rest of the movie figured out. I'll know how to do this when I get to the day. So we got to set that day, and it was a disaster. In fact, I didn't get all my shots, and thankfully we were able to work around it in the editing room. But like I was really got through that scene by the skin of my teeth, and I think that was the biggest lesson. I was like, never again. Every scene I do, I need to know exactly what I'm doing when I go in there, because whenever you go in to direct a scene, things are always going to change, no matter how much you've planned it. And if you come in with very little plans, even though you think you've got it, or you think all the other scenes make sense, so this one will at some point, that's not good enough. Because you get in there and you waste your own time, you waste your crew's time, you lose their trust. So that was a big thing for me on this movie. I was like, everything I do, I really have to know without a shadow of a doubt why and how I'm doing it. And if things change, that's fine, but I have to go in with the plan and just be certain that plan is for a purpose,
Yeah, no, I can understand. Now, what about Night and Today? You're currently working on that. You just finished filming on it. Is that correct?
Yeah, back in December.
Nice. So, are you super excited about this one?
I am. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really good film. Yeah, I'm very excited about it. It's a darker movie for me. Man from Outer Space was very lighthearted. It had depth, but it was very lighthearted. This one's a disaster thriller, and it's funny. I haven't talked to a lot of people about it back home since all of you guys have just gone through Hurricane Michael. It was kind of a weird thing to be prepping this movie, because literally, Michael hit on October 10th. Is that right, Trevor?
Yeah.
Because I was on a show called Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I'd been on that for 8 months as their assistant coordinator, and I was leaving the show on October 18th to go and prep my movie for a month and a half before shooting it. And so I was geared up to do that, and then Hurricane Michael hit, and you and our friends and my parents literally were going through a disaster, and it felt really weird going in to make a fictional disaster film that was dark and heavy, and just dealing with some just like issues that our society is facing, and also issues that I think a lot of just couples are facing. The movie's a lot about is very much about commitment, and it revolves around a couple that are in the middle of a divorce, and a nuclear attack happens, and the two people trying to get away from each other are now stuck together. So it was kind of a dark, heavy movie, and then of course this happens, and I'm thousands of miles away, and it just felt weird. It felt weird making the movie, and but then as I was going along in prep, it really came clear to me. I was like, well, this is now going to really connect with a lot of the people I know, and hopefully it will be something that's, not disrespectful, but, kind of, it's just something you can connect with and understand what major loss means, and what, and how important, life is, and how important our society is to each other.
Yeah, no, I totally understand it. I can't wait to see it. I remember we had just gotten back from being evacuated. It was like our first day in here, and I called you and we were talking, and you were like, dude, I feel bad for making this movie because y'all are going through this hurricane and all this jazz. And I was like, dude, no. I mean, it's important that stories like this, whether they're nonfiction or fiction, get told, because, I mean, I don't know. It was just the weirdest thing, because you see this stuff happen on the news But then it happens to you, and you're like, oh my gosh, can't believe that we just passed off this stuff that we saw in the news, and now it happens to us.
Absolutely, yeah. And then, not to mention, the Malibu fires were happening just 2 weeks before we shot the movie. And in fact, there's a location in our film that you won't see it on camera, but just to the right, it's completely charred and burned. We almost lost the location. We didn't think the permitting office was going to let us go there, but thankfully it all had subsided. But yeah, so it is this weird, and it's a sign of our times, just these disasters, they're bad, and like we've got to really work as a society to try to make sure that we're doing all we can to, like you said, be there for our fellow man and prepare better for these disasters all across the country and all across the world.
Let's move into happier territory. All right, so I asked you earlier who the top 10 people you met. Now, you've got 2 stories that are my absolute favorite. First, I want you to tell the story of your interaction with Jake Gyllenhaal. This is one of my favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. Jake's a really nice guy, first of all. I want to just throw that out there. But we all know he picks some very strange characters to play. And one of the films he did in the last couple of years was called Nightcrawler. For those of you who haven't seen it, I won't spoil it, but he plays a really sketchy dude. And like his signature thing in that movie is his eyes are just really just like very just gaping open all the time. Like that's how he plays the character. Like he physically keeps his eyes as big and wide as possible. And I foolishly, I was working on a movie called Nocturnal Animals with Jake, and the day before I met him, I decided to watch Nightcrawler. That was a huge mistake. Because once again, Jake was playing kind of a, if you haven't seen Nocturnal Animals, he's playing, actually, he's not playing a scary character in Nocturnal Animals, but definitely it's a very intense character. So the day I met him, he and Tom Ford and a couple of the other actors were having rehearsals at the studio we were working at, and they had asked me just to kind of be there to assist with anything, which was super cool. I had a blast that day. When I met Jake, it was so funny. He asked me he was like, "Hey, how's it going?" I was like, "Hey, pretty good." And then he asked me to do something for him, but he stared me right in the eyes, and I had just watched this movie, okay? And I think had I not watched the movie, it wouldn't have been a big deal. But his eyes just got really wide. He's like, "Hey Ben, can you please make sure you do this right now for me? It's my car's over here." And like just the way he did it was just so scary. And it's just like, I'm just the whole time I'm thinking this is the guy from Nightcrawler, and and of course he didn't mean it that way, but it was just so funny. He's just a very devoted and intense person, and I mean that in the best way possible. But it was just so funny how characters that he's played can really like imprint on you, kind of imprint on that person. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, he's such a good actor, but I remember you called me, you're like, "Dude, I just had a run-in with Jake Gyllenhaal, and it was kind of interesting." I was like, "Oh man, do tell." That was so great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But no, he's a really nice guy. He was always nice to me and everyone I know on the set. No one had problems with him. But yeah, he was just, he just, like I said, just because I'd watched that movie, it just like freaked me out, because he's just like staring into my soul, telling me, put this in his car real fast for him.
Just absolute perfect timing that you watched that the day before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So.
All right, now the last story. This is with the granddaddy of them all, your absolute favorite person in the world. We have been, both of us, to his mom's restaurant, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And we met his mom, and that was the coolest time ever. And I want you to tell us about the time you met your idol, Steven Spielberg.
Sure, yeah. Steven is pretty much second only to Jesus. This is correct.
Yeah, this is very factual. I can attest to that.
Steven's mother, who passed away 2 years ago, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I didn't tell you that? Yeah.
No, I didn't know that. Oh, man.
Look, she was 97 years old. She had lived an incredible life.
Absolutely.
got to nourish one of the best filmmakers ever. And she has 3 other daughters who 2 of them are filmmakers themselves. They do a lot of documentary work. And actually, I didn't know this until I met Miss Adler, but one of her daughters wrote the movie Big with Tom Hanks.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, I had no idea. Yeah. Anyways, long story short, she owned a restaurant here in LA. Very small place. Not many people but the locals knew about it, just south of Beverly Hills. And one day when I was really down, it was those first 5 months that I was out here, I was really down and just upset at just how hard things were. I just started looking up my hero and just reading about my hero, because reading about Spielberg just always brightens my day, because he really is a master filmmaker. And I stumbled over this article saying that both of his parents were still alive. And I'm like, good grief, they must be in their 90s. And they are. In fact, his father, who I did actually meet briefly, he's 102 now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's incredible. But this is 5 years ago. I'm like, man, his parents are still alive, because, Spielberg's no spring chicken anymore. And so I read this article, and they're like, yeah, she's got a restaurant in town. I'm like, I'm going there tomorrow. So I left, the next day for lunch and got to meet her. It was so cool. And then pretty much at least, every other week, I would go by for a Sunday afternoon lunch. It was like my treat for myself. And as the months went on, I finally got work on movies, which was, definitely helping my morale, and just stopping by there every once in a while was just another thing to kind of encourage me, because her restaurant was just so cool. It's got movie posters from all Steven's films, just family photos. It's just super cool place and really good food. Anyways, and then one day I'd actually been having a pretty rough day. I don't remember why, but I was having a pretty rough day, and I walked in there to get lunch, and I see Miss Adler sitting at her table. And there's this guy sitting in front of her, and he's wearing this hat, and he's got a jacket on, and I'm like, oh, that's Steven Spielberg. And so I go sit down. I'm shaking at this point, and I order my food, and I have to go to the bathroom. So I'm like, well, all right, I'm just going to hop up and go to the bathroom real quick. And I get up, I go to the restroom, I walk right by Steven and his mother, Miss Adler. And I'm like, don't be weird. This is incredibly inappropriate. Just, you're here to eat lunch, So I go to the restroom. I come back out, and Miss Adler sees me, and she looks at me and smiles for a minute. I just kind of say, hey, and then Steven looks up at me, and I'm like, well, shoot, if I'm going to do this is the moment. So I'm like, I say to Miss Adler, how are you doing? She's like, I'm doing really well. And I look over at Steven, and I say, hi, Mr. Spielberg. My name's Ben Hall. And he's, with a smile, just said, hey, Ben, it's so nice to meet you. And that was pretty much it. And I said, have a lovely day. And I went and ate my lunch, and Spielberg hung around for about another 15 minutes or so, and rolled out. And then, funny enough, I've seen him 2 or 3 other times now. When I would go to the restaurant, he would be there. But that was really the only time I got to talk to him in person. It was a really cool moment for me, just to get to meet someone who has just really defined what it means to be a filmmaker. That was really cool.
Man, that's so cool. I remember when we went there, he had just been there. Right? Because they said, oh, you just missed him, or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, the staff there at the restaurant, since I was there often, they knew me, and they knew I was a filmmaker. So anytime Steven was there, they always were. Because I mean, they had people on guard there, because he's a high profile guy, and
you could tell.
Yeah. But they were always so kind to me, and they were always so supportive. And actually, about a year ago, the restaurant closed down for renovations, and I was kind of getting concerned that it wasn't coming back. But I just saw an announcement last week that the restaurant is opening back up next week, actually.
Oh,
and
nice.
Have done a major renovation, and they're going to keep it going as kind of a legacy for her. So, but yeah, Miss Adler was just a very, very sweet person. You can tell Steven gets his spunkiness, his weirdness, and I mean that in the best way possible, from her. She was just such a lively person, and just you could tell she was always thinking, always had something funny to say, very creative, she was just always very, very generous and nice to me. And so I definitely miss her quite a bit.
Well, Ben, dude, as always, it's been an absolute pleasure. If people want to learn more about about your movie, The Man from Outer Space, and even Night and Today when it comes out, where should they look for that at?
I'm actually, I need to talk to you about this because I feel like you've become a master of this, but I am working on a website for my work. Right now, the best way to follow Night and Today, which is the film we're doing right now, is via Instagram. It's at Night, NIGHT, NIN, and then the number 2, and then the word day, DAY, at Night and Today. And then The Man from Outer Space, what I could encourage is go to Amazon and check it out. You can get on Amazon. You can also get on redbox.com streaming. I hope to be making an announcement via Instagram or Facebook about the Redbox kiosks throughout the country. But yeah, right now I think that's the best way. You can find my information on IMDb. I've got my stuff there. And
You do. I'd check that IMDb page weekly to make sure you keep it updated.
Very good. I think the only thing that's not on there right now is the new season of Cosmos. I'm just waiting for them to actually create an IMDb page for it. So.
Oh, there you go. I remember whenever it was right after Man from Outer Space went on Amazon, there was like 10, 12, 15 reviews or something like that. And one of the reviews was like 4 stars, but the guy was like, it was okay. And, I've never wanted to punch somebody through the internet, but at that time I was like, I want to punch you because it was a perfect film.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It is funny, when you release something like that, you are, especially in today's time, susceptible to all kinds of, comments.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There was quite a few that were very sweet, actually. The film is in worldwide distribution. It hasn't made it to all countries yet, but it is out there, and it sounds like the UK has been able to. They've distributed in the UK at this point, and actually on YouTube there's this review that this young lady did, and it was marvelous. It was so sweet, and I don't think anyone besides myself has described the movie as well as she did. So great. Yeah, so with all the there's definitely some goofy folks out there saying mean things. With all that to say, there's always those people who say something meaningful, and that's really sweet. So. Oh,
that's awesome, dude. Dude, I follow your Instagram. I mean, the movie's Instagram. It's fantastic. Sadie actually just got here, and she's like, "Oh, are you talking to Ben?" That's our puppy, just FYI. Well, Ben, dude, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for joining us on Farm Traveler, even though we just got a little look at the film industry. Always a pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, and thank you so much for everything you do, and just I'm always being educated by you about food and what we eat and how it's grown and where it's coming from, and I'm so glad to see the success of this site and all that you're doing with it.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
We'll see you later.
See ya. Bye-bye.